You are listening to the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management topics to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pmpodcast.blogspot.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to show number 17. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This should have been the Project Management Podcast for the 21st of January 2006. Unfortunately, after moving into my new home, it took my internet provider 13 days until the 24th of January 2006 to hook me back up. So now this is the Project Management Podcast for the 24th of January 2006. And today you will get to hear the interview with Sabrina Mancini-Johnson about how to use your project management skills in your job search. Let's get started with 2 announcements and some reader feedback, and then we will move right into that interview. The first announcement is about the schedule. I'm continuing to be a little bit more involved with moving into my new house, so the next show is 1.5 weeks from today on the 4th of February. So no show this coming Saturday, but Saturday in a week. Announcement number 2 is about sponsorship. Does your company have a project management tool, a project management book, or seminar to promote? Then why not become a sponsor of the Project Management Podcast? Being a sponsor of the podcast will immediately get your message into the ears of thousands of project managers worldwide at a cost that is much lower than what you would have to pay for an ad in a trade magazine. Simply write to me at pmpodcast@gmail.com and I'll be happy to discuss a sponsorship with you. Lastly, before we move on to the main section of the show, I have some listener feedback for you, which was posted by an anonymous listener on the blog, on the website, and it's about my review that I did, I think it was in the last show, about Borg World. They had, it's a podcast called borgworld.com, and they had a show on Project Manager, and the listener writes, "The guys at Borg World are great, and I listen to all their podcasts. However, their podcast on project management for web management was almost useless. They were both very flippant and seemed to talk more about using Microsoft Project than any formal framework or supporting material, that is to say risk, business cases, communications, contingency, etc." The feedback goes on to say that web-based projects now make a clear difference to the presentation and marketing of a company. I would have thought that they would have put more effort into this podcast, but it was near Christmas at the time. If the guys at Borg World read this, or of course now hear this, I'm afraid, guys, you missed a great opportunity to sing the virtues of proper project management practice and provide some key tips and methods, especially where consultants are concerned. That's about this review that I did on borgworld.com. Well, to me, I still stand to what I said. I liked the feeling of what they did on that show, because my experience as a project manager in web development was that it was always hectic, always things were falling left and right. So the show that they did actually represented my experience, but it seems that this listener here has a completely different experience about project management in web development. I've been out of it for 3 years. Quite possible that things have changed in there. The listener finishes his review by writing, "And now comes the usual slap on the back for you. Well done, great podcast. And by the way, it was me who went on about reading out too many emails about how great your podcast is, so you can skip reading this paragraph." Whoops, okay, I shouldn't have read that. Well, let's move on to the interview then with Sabrina Mancini-Johnson.
The Project Management Podcast feature interview. Today with Sabrina Mancini-Johnson from To Envision Incorporated.
Ladies and gents, today with me I have Sabrina Mancini-Johnson, and we will be talking about how to turn your career search into a project, as you project managers should. Welcome to the show, Sabrina.
Thank you very much, Cornelius.
Well, since we will be talking about the job search, let me start out by asking the question that everybody hears in their job interview. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Terrific. My name is Sabrina Mancini-Johnson. I am a local Southern California native. I have the pleasure of having 2 small children and also 2 wonderful Cocker Spaniels who I call family, and a wonderful husband, and we live down here in beautiful Southern California. At the same time, beyond my family, I've been in the world of IT project management for nearly 2 decades now, which probably gives my years away to everybody out there in the listening world.
Did you start out with punch cards?
I started out just at the time of punch cards.
Me too, yes.
Let's just say I started off in those cold rooms.
Yes.
And so, along with the world of project management and being a full-time mom, I am also actively involved in my civic interests in my community. And that's a little bit about me as a person.
And what about 2 Envision Inc.? How did that come about?
Yes, 2 Envision Inc. is the name of our recently formed company. We incorporated as a California company in 2004. 2 Envision Inc. Started off as a company in which, after leaving the full-time project management and IT leadership world, I decided to go back to my consulting roots and create a professional services organization that catered to small enterprise project management projects. Out of that, my husband and I own the company, so that's where you find the play on the number 2. And we wanted to set up a company that was very forthright within the values of integrity, and so we started thinking of envisioning what we wanted to do, and we came up with the name To Envision. We've since grown into also having a staffing division that caters to project management, and we're enjoying our 2nd year of existence.
But only IT project management, right?
IT and business project management.
Okay.
You'd be amazed how many requests we get for non-IT project managers.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting, because the PMIOC here in Southern California, we have about 60% of IT project managers. So is it changing again? Is the need going back to more non-IT project managers?
I think that there's definitely a margin of project management that caters to the back office systems, the HR, the ERP, somewhat of the training and e-learning as well. And we're also seeing that there's a different variance in the interest of project managers by county. Riverside County being very strong with more of your manufacturing, semiconductors.
Of course, yes, that makes sense.
And also some of our out-of-state requests that we get that are also certainly within the world of aerospace and or other types of industries.
Out of state, how far out of state do you go?
Right now, we have extended ourselves into the Texas area, and we're partnering with some business in Texas, and we're trying to take it slow and steady, trying to have our focus more here in the Southern California, LA Basin area. Okay. But as the needs arise, we do certainly move into that direction.
All right. Okay. So that was a little bit about yourself. Let's move over to your templates.
Sure.
Now, when I first met you, that was at the networking evening that we had on November 16th, I think, and you gave a 90-minute presentation titled Project Managing Your Career Search. What prompted you to choose that topic?
Well, a fellow peer of mine that was heading up the career nights had asked me to be a guest speaker, and she had really kind of asked me to come up with something that was unique. After all, it was the closure of this experience in this career night, and I think that she was concerned that maybe everybody had heard everything already once or 10 times. So it wasn't very hard for me to come up with this concept, being that as I was speaking to people who were perhaps career searching, I really wanted to cater to something that really inherently hit home, and that was the fact that project managers need to address their career search just like a project that you construct with an initiation phase and a post-execution phase.
Right.
And I thought, we don't do this very well as project managers. We think that there's some other magic to doing projects outside of our day-to-day world, but there is no magic. And so I wanted to show that you can apply the same methodologies we use in business towards your personal career search, or maybe a project that you may be having in some other capacity in your personal life.
Right. I definitely found that it was unique. I mean, I was sitting there, I was listening to you, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is so new, this is so different, and that's why I asked you to be here. Now, do you know if anybody has actually used these templates, and did you get any feedback from it yet?
I have gotten feedback from it. Actually, I have several friends of mine who have used them that are in the non-project management world, if you will.
Okay.
And I think that later on we have a certain topic that we'll talk about as to the applicability to this material towards other areas.
Well, let's talk about it right now. How do you feel? Could you use these templates for other areas, for non-project managers?
Most definitely. I created this to be specifically towards an audience that evening. I think that the part of being a good project manager is being an effective communicator. So understanding who my audience was that night was part of gauging the conversation towards project managers. But as I was preparing these templates, Cornelius, the funny fact was that I was thinking to myself, if I was meeting with a large group of engineers, or perhaps these were IT executives, or professionals that were in the world of education, how much of this would I be changing? And I would be changing the 25% of these templates that, as you review them outside there in the listening world, you'll see things that you can really just change based on the industry. So overall, I took some of the closest, nearest, and dearest peers of mine, and I said, slice it, dice it, do what you will. Just don't put too much red ink on it. I've got feelings. And so they came back with wonderful commentary saying, why isn't this out there somewhere?
And that's what I was thinking as well.
And what are you doing just holding on to your chest of these materials? And what other things are you going to be doing? And I thought, wow, I didn't know that this was so well received. I really kind of just put a common sense feel to it, to yet again take and depersonalize somewhat of a subject that is taboo, and that is, how did you get your job? You ever sat down with somebody to ask them, how did you get your job? Tell me a little bit about who you knew, how did you get in there? And I always kind of noticed, through my career, that people are very guarded about that information. I knew somebody, or it just happened, or, it came through a posting. And I thought, I think that we need to disassemble this and really dissect this down to what are the key areas, because most of the things that I find are that candidates that are actively looking for a position are really at a moment in their lives where they're stressed.
Right.
They're trying to prioritize their needs, some of their bottom line assessments as to what they can live with or without. And it's an emotional period.
Right.
And I thought, wouldn't it be handy, just like you grab your shopping list to go out and do some type of, purchase or procurement, as we do in our business, to have something that we could apply during that moment. With all of your faculty saying, I know I'm a little bit anxious, I know I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm going to take these things and I'm going to apply myself towards them. And I know that if I apply my energy towards this, I have done everything I can possibly do. It's very important as a project manager to check off things.
At the end of the day,
and
see
so,
the work progressing.
That is right.
Yes.
And so I thought, let us do the check-off method, and let us take it to this wonderful audience of PMP certified project managers, and let's open it up for a dialogue. Let us get from the audience things that are just golden nuggets of information that have worked for them, and let's start to compile this so that we can help each other.
Right. Okay. Well, you have about 4 or 5 different templates, I believe.
Yes.
And let's start out with the actual project plan that you have, project planning your career. Let us go through, we'll talk about each of the major areas that you have in here, and you can give me your thoughts about it. As you said, you started out with initiating phase, pre-interview stage. And the first one is define the need for a new career or transition to a new job change. And it's quite simple. It's either voluntary or involuntary, right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, if you can think of any other ones out there, audience, let us know. But truly, it's either you're in a situation in life you have to, or you don't quite have to yet. And it's the old adage, should I look for a job while I'm still working, or am I forced in a situation that's unpredictable in life? Downsizing, downturns, issues in your family. So you're either in a voluntary or involuntary stage.
So this is really mostly focused at people who know I do want to find a new job, no matter whether it's voluntary or involuntary. This is not going to help you decide, should I get a new job or should I not get a new job?
And the reason that I put that up front as the initiation phase of this particular career planning project is because the baseline of your time element for job searching is going to vary vastly, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. So as you start to first assess the very basic question, do I have to do this right away, or is it something I have time to? You can start to go ahead and measure and give yourself time frames that are realistic based on just that simple question.
Okay. Now, let's move over to the task duration column that you have. You put in 90 days at the very top here. I assume that's just an example, right?
It was just an example, and I thought, in a, certainly in an involuntary stage, your average time that it takes you to find a job, and I'm not saying the best job in your life, but just a job, is usually around 90 days. Okay. And I would say that if you can give yourself some type of frame of mind, that is probably a reasonable time frame, and be realistic is the key here.
Right. Okay. Next topic here is a self-assessment phase. What were your thoughts behind that?
The self-assessment phase is really gauged towards defining, again, who you are as a professional. So many times you have been heads down doing your job that you don't realize how many more competencies or skills that you have acquired in your current position.
Right.
I think sometimes when people start to do a job search, Cornelius, they start to just want to put together quickly a new resume, and they often leave off some of those key items that are memorable or that are milestones, if you will, about that last job. So this is again, a very inward look at yourself and being almost self-critical and saying, what have I gained since the last time I was out there job searching?
Right.
And really looking at your interests, your skills, your goals that you might have. Your goals can change from year to year, as you know, as a professional. Your readiness to accept certain type of work that may be desirable versus actually important in your life can be very different based on where you are in your life's journey. So this is that time to look inward and make your assessment. And this is a quick brainstorming. This shouldn't take you, a long time, days and days. You should just sit down and for each of these, put down a couple bullet points that help you understand
where you are at.
Where you are. And again, it's very introspective. Be honest with yourself. If your goal isn't to be the next CIO or the next enterprise PM and you want to make a lateral change in your life, sometimes seeing it in writing is what it takes.
Yeah. Okay. Following the self-assessment, we have the research and explore career options.
This component is really doing a outward analytical exercise. Who would I like to work with? Who are some of those top companies that when I read the latest edition of Baseline magazine, boy, I'd love to work for one of those top 100 companies.
Okay.
And as a project manager, you might find yourself stimulated by different companies that have, more assets and or interest in R&D, versus some of the older companies that are more established and structured. What is it that you are looking for in a target employer, and list a couple of those top companies that you would like to work for.
Okay. Then next we have prepare job search materials and develop job search skills.
And this is now getting down into the beef, if we say that. Many folks like to start here, and I was holding back in our template to say, don't start there until you do some of this critical analysis and introspective research. Now you're ready to create a full-fledged resume, and what I do recommend in here as a candidate is to have a long version versus an abridged version.
Right.
I think there's always that $64,000 question that people ask, what is too long? And I always say there is no such thing as too long.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a long version and you want to go ahead and put that out there, remember that a lot of these portals, a lot of these websites have search engines that look off of trigger words and or keywords. So it's not going to hurt you to have a longer version versus an abridged version.
You definitely want to have the 3 letters PMP in there, or any other kind of project management certification that you have.
That is right.
Yeah.
Methodologies that you've used, whether it's PMBOK, whether it's RUP,
Yeah.
whether it's IDLE, which is hot on the market,
Right, right. Yeah.
SOX is another one as well.
And we also have to mention here, of course, that since this is a worldwide show, that yes, in the United States we use resumes, but in Europe you go more towards a CV style. So, I mean, take line 25 and replace it with design CV, where it says design resume right here.
Most
right?
definitely.
Yeah.
And I think also that the idea of also thinking out of the box, folks, you don't have to create necessarily a chronological resume, but create something that's a functional resume. If you're focusing on your project management experience and you've only had 5 years and your other 10 years were being in as a network engineer, you certainly can go ahead and just write your resume towards that functional expertise, because again, you don't want to show it in that chronological order.
Right.
If they request a chronological, and that kind of follows more of a CV style. Who am I? What am I about? And what are my key attributes and successes?
In this section here, you also mentioned create a standard cover letter for each position. Now, when I was looking for my current job, 99% of my job search was online, and I had to submit my resume via some sort of an engine to the companies. Is a cover letter still needed in these days?
I think this is, again, one of those issues, Cornelius, that it's, half a dozen right, half a dozen the other way. If you are submitting via fax, which some people still use that as a viable method of submitting, I would certainly not just put a resume out there without a cover letter. Page numbers, a simple thing like putting page numbers is important. But I do agree with you that cover letters are less and less regarded by true staffing personnel that are more in the search engine mode, if you will. Having a staffing company and really looking at candidates from a holistic perspective. Do I look at cover letters that come through that allow a person to introduce themselves? Yes, I do. I think that that's an important way to communicate and to introduce yourself instead of just throwing a resume over the fence, so to speak.
Yes.
So I think, again, it's a very personal type of interest level. It can't hurt you, certainly. It may not be used and discarded, but at least it's a formal way of introduction. Think about the company that you're submitting yourself. Are they a formal type of company, a conservative company? Then I would probably go with a cover letter.
Right. Also, my guess is once your resume gets past the first, 20-second test,
That's right.
they may actually read your cover letter, right?
That is right.
Okay.
That is right.
Next, I think we're getting into the planning phase here. Plan and conduct job search campaign strategies, and this one is define the realistic time frame that you have to conduct this change.
This is something, again, where we start talking about being realistic as to what it takes to job search. I am a very methodical person, both managing a project, but also somewhat in my personal life to try to understand what are my best hours to go ahead and do certain types of tasks. I'm a morning person, for example, so doing my job searching in the morning in my past was something that I would devote to. It was quiet time, downtime, and maybe it is what I allotted as I was reading my paper and reading my business section and then going to do some of my career searching that I was doing at that particular time. I think it's important to go ahead and set a base time in which you're going to be consistent. Again, remember, this is an emotional time. It's something where you may or may not be stressed and nervous. If you start doing it methodically, you start getting a rhythm and you start understanding that though you may not be working full time right then and there, you are working for yourself and representing yourself as your own company, and that is definitely a technique of a professional person. Here is also assessing, again, your realistic time frame. Is a month realistic? Is 3 months? This goes back to our original cells that we had about whether it's an active or passive type of job search. Can you even
define that? I mean, if you find a job today, your job search is over. But if you don't find a job for 6 months, that just happens,
It just happens, but it also is dictated on, I think, your financial situation, right?
True.
You've got to look at yourself, and here goes a couple of the taboo topics, How long can you afford to be out of work? It's a very personal question.
Yeah.
But again,
what's your risk if you don't find one? How do you mitigate that?
How do you mitigate
what are your workarounds going to be? If you don't have a job in 2 months, are you going to go and work at restaurant as a waiter? I mean, are you willing to do that?
Right. And where is your line in the sand as a candidate? I think that if you go through that introspective look at yourself, you can say, I've got X amount of money that I've got that is stowed away as my safety net, and I can go till this date, and then at that time, if I don't have my greatest position that I seek, I will take something else. You have to answer those hardcore questions to yourself so that you can at least have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, because as a good project manager,
you have those plans.
You have to have those.
Yes, exactly.
So have one in your career as well.
Okay. Job search strategies. You list about 10 of them, right? Here.
Right. And again, depending on what your native country is, and certainly the availability of some of the different types of methods in which you can network, we started just going here as a listing and put down there's a personal network, a professional network, there are local chapters in your town of professional organizations, there's career fairs, there are employment services and or staffing companies that can help you. But again, assessing who all are you going to start using and what methods are you going to start using to tap into. Here's 10 of them. I think that we kind of exhausted ourselves with not knowing any additional ones, only because your professional and your personal network goes a long way.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I remember from from that networking evening was the mention that you should always be a member of 2 professional networks. One is your profession, meaning the PMI or whatever your project management organization may be, and second, your company's professional network. For instance, I'm in a bank, so I would need to find a professional network for banking experts and become involved there as well. So depending on what industry you're in, find an industry-specific network. Is that right?
Definitely.
Okay.
I think that in the last year I've seen also a lot of wonderful sites that within your town are available to have these kind of one-off impromptu speed networking that I've seen come up,
Yes.
where people are going and having dinner or lunch and meeting with a miscellaneous amount of different folks from different career paths.
Right.
And I think that is also a venue that we don't necessarily focus on, because sometimes we're more just professional organization driven. But these are also some of the leaders in some of those companies that earlier on we defined as maybe some of the companies we'd like to work at, you know. Is one of those companies, do a little research, what if you want to go work at GE? What is GE doing in your town as far as a benefit or some type of a fundraiser, or how can you meet some of those people just on a networking basis, because you never know who might be at some of those types of organization events, and you might have a new contact.
Right. I just remembered another job strategy that's completely thinking outside the box. Somebody told that to me a little while ago when I was looking for a job. He said he knew of a project manager who put on business suit and tie and shirt, made himself a huge sign and stood at the intersection of the road, and the sign read, "Project manager looking for work, have resume." And of course, when the car stopped at the red light, he was walking around with that big sign, and people actually rolled down the window and he handed them their resume right there and then. He found a job through that, and the next week he came back, found a job, thank you very much, and was standing there the same day again. So
that was terrific.
Completely thinking outside the box. I think we have to
That is
update your job search strategies here to include
signage.
that. Signage at the road. All
That's
right.
a great one.
Your next section is follow-up and record keeping.
Yes, this is where we've attached a few different templates
Yes, exactly.
to be certainly successors to this project management template. We talk about recording our interviews, and we've got a template for that.
Yeah. Now, why should you record your interviews? I mean, what's the intent of writing this down?
The intent of writing this down, Cornelius, is because sometimes, especially in a passive type of search, you are going to be searching across a long continuum of a time frame. It may be 3 months. And I think, quite frankly, we get a little rusty about, remembering some of the key points of an interview post-interview several weeks later.
Right.
I used to find myself in this situation, and I think I spoke to who again? Or, quite embarrassingly, just saying, I don't quite remember the culture issues that I may have had, but I know I had some issues. And I thought, shame on me for not remembering these things. Let me put something together in which I can have a one-pager about finishing up my notes post-interview.
Yeah, so this is the project documentation, if you wish.
This is your project,
Right.
controls here, your documentation, your post-assessment. How did this go? How did I do, first of all?
Lessons learned?
Lessons learned.
Yeah.
Very good. So in there we put down a couple different key areas that I considered highlights of an interview. What was their corporate culture like? Understanding the job's responsibilities was another key area. Understanding who you would report and their leadership style.
Right.
The next one was understanding what assignment is going to be part of your day one. Acceptable salary expectations, which is very important. Suitability for this position, which I thought was an important category. Is this position for me or is it not for me? Just a sheer, quick answer on that one. And the last couple ones were, did I feel positive that I could work for this leader and perform accordingly? And lastly, the overall match for this position. What I decided with this lessons learned was almost to create somewhat of a report card.
Yeah, well, you have the grade there as well.
You
right?
got it. And the grade, what I put there was a score. I decided to put down some type of way, again, to baseline a number and take the emotion out of the decision. And then come up with a comparison. If I had 5 different interviews, which one was the strongest? People always say, hey, just do a pros and cons. Yeah. And I'm like, that's good. That's really good. But what do those pros and cons mean to me based on my goals and based on my needs? Each of those pros and cons has a direct correlation to a weight. a weight that has emotion to it or that has absolutely dollar value to it.
So in the end, you should be able to take the 3 interviews that you've had, put them next to each other and say, this one gets a score of 95 and the others are lower, so I take the 95.
Exactly. This one is going to suit me better.
Okay.
And so again, the score on the interview record, again, you could adapt this to whatever it is that you want to do, but I put down a total score of 40 points for each of these categories. A 35 to 40 would be a good fit for you. A 20 to 30 would be an average fit. And under 20 points, I said not a good fit. Run. And it's okay to go ahead and state that. Sometimes we're afraid because we're in need.
Yeah.
But remember, when you're in need, you're not necessarily making some of the objective decisions that you should. You may be somewhat emotional and subjective because you need work.
Okay.
For example, if you are not suitable to work at this particular position because you feel that you couldn't perform for this leader or this leader wasn't a leadership style that you could work with, that's a strong enough criteria to make that a decision breaker.
Right.
Versus 2 other offers that may have a suitable leader, but perhaps not have quite the salary that you may want. But it has definitely the type of leadership, Think about what's important to you. Are you going to be there for the long haul? Or are you there for the short term? Are you on a contract or are you applying for a permanent position? Maybe if you're on a contract, you're a little less engaged with what the culture is and what the leader's like because you're just delivering deliverables, if you will.
And you can put that into the weighing system as well.
Most definitely.
And take that into consideration.
Most definitely. Some other folks may want to add geographic areas. Amount of travel could be important in your life. And again, this is open to you adding more categories as to what is important. I just wanted to stimulate our viewers and our audience to think about what's important in their grading skills.
Okay.
Other things that we talked about in the follow-up and record keeping was record the companies that you've submitted yourself
to. You have a template for job search records, right?
Right. I found myself getting very Magoo-like and fuzzy-headed at times because in my world of consulting and contracting, a lot of times you are not submitting yourself directly to a client. You're submitting yourself to a staffing agency who in turn will be submitting you to a client.
Right.
So there is a good potential that if you're working with multiple staffing companies that you will be either stepping on each other's toes or being resubmitted for another position that the first staffing agency has already submitted you to and potentially canceling out your opportunities and or creating somewhat of a negative vibe with those staffing agencies. So it was very difficult as I was doing passive job searching across a longer continuum to remember who have I submitted myself to.
With this, you have a record. You can also give it to your staffing agency,
and you can give it to your staffing agency.
These are the people I already applied at, and don't bother going there.
Yes, because sometimes they do a dance on the phone where they're I can't tell you who that is until I get a little closer to understanding who you are. And in that type of situation, just like Cornelia said, send it to them on an e-copy and say, look, here's who I've submitted myself to. You let me know if I've already been there or not, And it helps us to stay lucid as to who we've spoken to already.
Okay.
Other things that are good types of venues for record keeping, record your thank you notes that you've sent. I think that's an important part of communication and protocol in business. Also record your referrals that you've made and add them to your contact management tools. You may have made some wonderful referrals across this job search, and you may not be doing business with them today, but in 6 months from now, maybe you'll have a friend that's in need of a job. Who is that agency that you worked with that was very stand up and you want to go ahead and keep those fresh. Remember, networking isn't just for bad times, it's for great times and good times as well. And lastly, follow-up actions. Record what you need to do as a person from a follow-up perspective. Maybe somebody wants you to go in there and take some type of a competency test, or maybe they require some type of a bio or some type of drug screening test. There may be things that you need to do post-interview that are certainly items that need follow-up.
Right. The next list that you had, and I really liked this one, is interview preparation questions for project managers. Whenever you go to a website, they give you the 10 most frequently asked questions in an interview. Well, that's nice, but what about project management questions? And you actually have a list here of a little bit over 20 questions, 20 that you should ask yourself, and 20 questions that they may ask you in regards to project management on the project. And I really like this because it's outside the box. It's not just the standard, here, go take an interview. For instance, do you consider yourself a good project manager and project leader? What do you say if they ask this to you?
That is
So
right.
this is a very nice list. I really liked this.
Thank you, Cornelius. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to stimulate those type of questions that you should prepare yourself for, or that possibly you can turn them inside out into case studies in which you've done some of this, and you can answer these very cool, very neutral, and just knock their socks off and get that job. I think the folks that can address those harder questions really show the thought process and preparation. Another one that's in here that I didn't put in here that came up the other day and I was speaking to somebody about is name a project that you failed on, and why did it fail?
I was actually asked that question.
And I think that was very interesting, and it was a fair question, and I think employers want to hear that vulnerability, and they also want to hear, how did you get yourself out of that situation? Because we all know that it's a tough one.
70% of all IT projects fail, something like that. I don't recall the number. It changes every year.
That is right, and every resume says it's been a successful project,
Exactly.
which
So
is a
where
quandary.
are the failed projects?
That's right. Where are those failed projects?
Okay.
I think also the main reason that I also created those pre-interview prep questions was to also give you some control, listeners, that if you are in a situation in which, God forbid, you don't have a good interviewer, that you can navigate through that and you don't waste your time. And again, you can position these through some careful communication, but you can not lose your bearing in that discussion. There are always those moments in which you go, oh dear, this person does not know how to interview, or they haven't prepared for
Happened
this.
to me, yeah.
And how do I make the best of this situation and somewhat get on the soapbox and toot my horn? And so you can go ahead and say, let me tell you a little bit about why I think I'm a good project leader and why I should be the next person for this position. I know it seems to be somewhat presumptuous, but at the end of the day, you're there at the interview, you want to be noticed. Take these 10 things and turn them into statements about yourself. That is powerful. And that way you're not scratching your head trying to prepare and think, oh dear, what do I need to ask myself next,
Now, those are all the templates that you have created so far. Are you planning to do any more? Is there anything else in the works?
I am, and I think it goes back to my roots of project management, Cornelius. I think that this was certainly focusing on the career searching, and the next thing that I really want to focus on is putting together some very essential templates for risk mitigation type of assessments. I find that there's a lot out there that talks to you about key areas in which you should mitigate risk in a project, but they don't really spend the time or share the secrets of how to mitigate the risk and how to mitigate the risk at a short term and an intermediate and a long term level, and equate the dollars and or the people and the resources that need to be allocated with that. After being in a IT leadership position for many years and understanding what it means to get yourself out of hot water, risk mitigation has to do also with bottom line issues like how much staffing, how much budget is available to you, and politics. And I think that putting together templates that really assess those types of qualities and calibrate what you can or can't do as a project manager are really important. I'd like to help project managers take the emotion out of what you can do in your capacity and what you need to bump up to your executive sponsor.
Right. So that's a completely separate set of templates then from these job search
Definitely.
templates, right?
And I guess that goes back to my acumen and to my competencies as a project leader. This was somewhat of a easier template because it dealt with an issue that is much more simple, which is our career search.
Now, do you think that using your template will make career search go faster for a project manager?
I think so, and this is how I think it'll go faster. It'll go faster because you'll know that you don't need to do it 8 hours a day. It'll go faster because you will feel in control of being able to mitigate the current risk at your hand, which is you need to find a job. But you will also be able to go on and say, I've checked this off. I am now free to go about my day the rest of the time doing what I need to do and stay positive within this challenging period. Do I think that that's faster? Yes. I think it's more efficient is what I think.
And I think from a project management point of view, from a project manager point of view, it's something you can hold on to, right?
It is. It's a tangible. Yeah. It's a tangible deliverable. You know, should your wife or husband or partner ask you, what have you done today? You can say, I have completed cells 20 through 25. Yeah. I equate that with completion, tangible. I have taken care of this. I think that sometimes, Cornelius, as this is floating through our mind and we've done parts of these or some of these, it can create that confusion. It can create somewhat that static that you have, and you don't need that within this very critical period. The most important assessment is to free up your time so that you can focus on your family, your friends, and do fun things during a challenging time, not to deliberate about it for 24 hours a day and victimize yourself about being out of work. That's not going to make it any better.
Okay. And in order to get your hands onto Sabrina's templates, I will put Sabrina's email address and also the link to her company, 2Envision Inc., up on my blog, and you can write to Sabrina and she will send you the latest version of the templates. And of course, if you have any updates, feel free to send her your revisions back, and she will include those. Now, I already mentioned it earlier that Europeans use CVs, while here in the United States it's mostly a resume. Now, do you feel that even though this is probably an American-centric version of career search, that this is applicable worldwide?
I think it is, and I think it is a good starting ground for you to take, whether you're in a European or Asian or other country, and take it and adapt it to what is done regionally in your country. You know, adapt it to what you need to change in order to go ahead and have it be more parallel to how you do business internationally and abroad. Okay. But at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We all have the same needs and certain levels of organization and or control that we need in finding our jobs. And so again, back to our earlier discussion, it can go out of the world of project management even in a stronger way to apply it towards finding another job, maybe in a whole other type of industry. There's few basic things that you need to do to organize yourself, and that was the idea. Give me the short laundry list of what I need to do to find a job and say that I'm not missing out on anything.
Right. In that case, let us move on to the final 10 questions, the 10 standard questions that I ask every project manager at every interview that I'm doing here. So, number 1, Sabrina, what was your favorite project?
My favorite project was a non-IT project in which I deployed a recruiting system for a client a while back, and it was very fun to actually work with something that seemed to be so people-oriented and systems-oriented.
Did that get you started in the whole recruitment area? That wasn't...
No, I had a former ERP
okay.
background, so with HR and ERP, it seemed to be one of those things that naturally came as a project,
Okay.
but I realized how fun that type of software and or project was.
Number 2, what project would you like to have managed?
I think it would have been the Apollo 13 First Man on the Moon project.
Really?
Yes.
It's a
tough
tough one.
project, and
Tough
I think at the same time, just one of those fantasy projects that the bigger the better in my world, for projects. I love complex, worldwide type of projects, and I think it must have been amazing for the team and the members that were in that. I just get chills thinking about it, being a little girl and watching it on TV.
Number 3, what is your favorite project management book?
I think that the most important thing to kind of focus on with project management is that project management is all about being a project leader. And so I read a really interesting book that I finished up in the last couple weeks that was called Never Eat Alone and Other Secrets to Success One Relationship at a Time. And the author is Keith Ferrazzi. And I read this book because a peer of mine told me that it was fabulous. And that's all he said. He said, you must go out and buy Never Eat Alone. And we both happen to be culinary experts and cooking freaks, and I thought, oh, this is Eric telling me to go get another wonderful gastronomic book, and it's going to be wonderful, plates of something that I'll be preparing. And sure enough, it happened to be about never eating alone as a strategy for relationship building and for networking. And it went and took networking to a whole other level as to what you can do as a professional or a personal person in your personal life, to really show off your assets to everybody you meet every single day in a non-ostentatious way through relationship building.
Right.
And I found it very intriguing. It took it to the next level.
Yeah.
It gave you wonderful tips. It gave you bullet points. And if you like things as a project manager, certainly it helps you to understand how to go deeper with your colleagues and your friends in relationship building. Because at the end of the day, career searching and finding your careers is really about networking and relationships.
And yes.
It's all about relationships. Right. So this was a really great project management book that I'd like to recommend. I put down Never Eat Alone, and I also recommended First Break All the Rules by the Gallup organization. That was a great book.
Okay.
So 2 of those.
Number 4, what is the topic of the next seminar that you're planning to attend?
Here you guys are going to see I'm a little bit of an IT geek. I'm going to be going to a symposium on identity management and that particular initiative, and I'm extremely interested in that subject. And I have deployed an identity management product before, and I just find it riveting.
Wow.
So that's where I'll be going.
Okay. Number 5, what is the best way to make a project fail?
Stay in the background. Don't tread any water. Just be quiet. That's just not going to work.
Yep. Number 6, how do you like to celebrate a successful project?
Certainly a round of drinks for everybody, Cornelius. And after we have our liquid celebration, I do like to make wonderful presentations in which, as a project manager, I award each of the members with a special, whether it be a certificate or some type of gift, and acknowledge them in front of their teammates as to what value they brought to the team. So
personal touch,
and also in front of their team so that they can get the accolades that they deserve.
Number 7, in your projects, where do you focus most of your attention in order to be successful?
Getting to be the best friend of our executive sponsors. I find that is where I focus my time. A lot of us don't like to get involved in the politics, but I found in being a successful project manager myself and leader that being in the politics is where you need to be, because that's where the decisions are made. And believe me, every time that I've needed to extend my timelines or get more budget, it's because I've had good relationships with those sponsors.
It works every time, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Number 8, if you weren't a project manager, what would you like to be?
Well, I took one of those tests in which they said alternate career paths, and it said I should have been an ambulance driver. I think that's equated to project management. And then it said my secondary profession should have been an ER doctor. So I suppose I'm going to go with what the test said, and I would have gauged myself towards being an ER doctor.
Yet the word deadline suddenly becomes gets a completely different meaning.
That's right.
There.
Code blue. Code blue.
Yes. Number 9. What is the one thing that a project manager cannot live without?
I put down an eraser and certainly a sense of humor.
Okay.
And I know that now we use our delete key, but it's so much of, back in the day of using your pencil and your lead, a lot of erasing was within your project planning.
Mm-hmm. Number 10, finally, the oldest question in project management. What is more important in a project manager? Project management expertise or industry expertise?
I said neither. I stumped you by saying that it had to be leadership DNA.
Wow, that's a different approach.
And I tried to go back and forth to answer this with following your protocol, and I just couldn't come up with
acceptable.
it. So I went inward
Leadership is more important.
And I said leadership DNA.
Good. I accept that. That is a perfect answer to this. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you as well, Cornelius, and thank you to the audience. Best of success in your future career planning, everyone.
That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening. The next show is going to be in 1.5 weeks, and then we will take a look at soft skills in project management. As always, you can find us on the web at pmpodcast.blogspot.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. And when you write, as always, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. Here's what your customer is going to think after you have finished interviewing them about the requirements. They're going to think, I know that you believe that you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. With that, remember not to let the paperwork get in the way of your real job. You're supposed to manage a project, and in any organization, this means some degree of red tape and formalities. And don't let that get in the way of your ability to actually deliver the project. Until next time.